Welcome to Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thrilled you've joined us today and truly appreciate your support. We're curious. Where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Architect. Vincent Harlow stood at the edge of his property, watching as the sun set over the lake he'd built his dream home beside. At 43, he had everything most men would envy: a successful architectural firm, wealth accumulated through years of disciplined work, and a wife who was the envy of his peers. Yet something felt hollow about their 15-year marriage to Diana. "Beautiful view," came a voice from behind him. Vincent turned to see his brother-in-law, Paul Lambert, walking toward him with 2 glasses of whiskey. "It should be. Cost enough to have this lot cleared just right," Vincent replied, accepting the drink. "Diana's inside, finalizing details for the reunion next week. You ready for the Lambert clan invasion?" Vincent took a long sip. "As ready as I'll ever be." The truth was, Vincent dreaded these gatherings. Diana's family, the wealthy, old-money Lamberts, had never fully accepted him. Despite his own success, they viewed him as an outsider who'd somehow tricked their princess into marriage. Only Paul treated him like a genuine brother. "How are things between you two anyway?" Paul asked, his voice careful. Vincent studied the amber liquid in his glass. "Fine. Busy. The Milan project has me traveling too much." "That's what I figured," Paul muttered, looking uncomfortable. "Listen, Vince." "Mr. Harlow." The moment was interrupted by Leon, Vincent's assistant, hurrying across the lawn. "I'm sorry to disturb you, but there's an urgent call from the contractor in Seattle." Vincent nodded at Paul. "Rain, check on that conversation." As he walked away, Vincent missed the troubled look on Paul's face, the look of a man who knew something devastating and couldn't decide whether to tell. Later that night, Vincent found Diana in their bedroom, organizing photo albums. "The Milan designs were approved," he said, loosening his tie. "I'll need to fly out next Tuesday." Diana didn't look up. "During the family reunion?" "We've had this planned for months, Vincent. It can't be helped. 3 days, then I'll be back." "You're always leaving," Diana said, her voice tight. "Everyone notices, you know. My mother asked if we were separated and just hadn't announced it yet." Vincent felt a flare of anger. "Maybe if your family weren't so judgmental about my work." "It's not just them," Diana interrupted, finally meeting his eyes. "I noticed too." Something in her gaze made Vincent pause. There was resentment there, but also something else. Guilt? Before he could pursue it, Diana's phone buzzed with a text. She glanced at it, then quickly turned the phone face down. "Who's that at this hour?" Vincent asked. "Just Meredith about the catering," Diana answered too quickly. She stood up, gathering the albums. "I should get these downstairs." Vincent watched her leave, the tension in her shoulders obvious. He'd built a career noticing details, and lately, the details in his marriage formed a troubling pattern. Hushed phone calls, unexplained absences, emotional distance. He moved to the window, looking out at the massive oak tree they'd preserved when building the house. Diana had insisted on it, claiming it had character. Now its shadow loomed over their bedroom like a warning. The next morning, Vincent found an unfamiliar cufflink under their bed while retrieving a dropped pen. Silver with a distinctive blue stone, definitely not his. He pocketed it without comment, a cold feeling settling in his stomach. Over dinner that evening, he studied his wife's face, still beautiful at 40, with dark hair and the elegant features that had captivated him when they'd met at a charity function nearly 2 decades ago. They'd been seated at the same table, Vincent there to network for his fledgling firm, Diana representing her family's charitable foundation. "I think I'll stay the whole week for the reunion," Vincent said suddenly. "The Milan trip can wait." Diana looked up, surprise evident. "Really? What changed?" "I've been neglecting what matters," he said, watching her closely. "Time to correct that." A flicker of something, alarm, crossed Diana's face before she smiled. "That's wonderful. Everyone will be so pleased." Vincent nodded, taking a sip of wine. "I'm sure they will." That night, he lay awake, turning the foreign cufflink between his fingers in the darkness. Diana slept beside him, her breathing even. Vincent had built his success on careful planning and attention to detail. Now, those same skills would serve a different purpose. The architect would begin designing something new, the perfect unveiling of the truth. Chapter 2. The Reunion. The Lambert family reunion transformed Vincent and Diana's lakeside mansion into a showcase of forced smiles and whispered conversations. Diana flitted between groups like a socialite on stage, her laugh a pitch higher than natural. Vincent observed it all with newfound clarity, noticing the glances that followed his wife, the way certain relatives avoided his eyes. Vincent carried a crystal tumbler of bourbon as he navigated through clusters of Diana's family. The Lamberts had always been a tight-knit group, cousins who summered together in the Hamptons, uncles who brokered business deals over golf, and who maintained the social calendar with military precision. Despite 15 years of marriage, Vincent remained the outsider, the self-made man who'd climbed his way up without their pedigree. Vincent, darling, Diana's mother, Vivian Lambert, approached with her perpetual look of mild disappointment. Diana tells me you almost missed our gathering for work again. Plans change, Vivian, Vincent replied evenly. I wouldn't miss this. How thoughtful, she said with a thin smile. Have you met Diana's old friend Nolan? He's just returned from managing our family investments in Europe. Vincent turned to see a tall man with salt and pepper hair engaged in animated conversation with Diana across the room. She laughed at something he said, touching his arm longer than necessary. We haven't been formally introduced, Vincent said, his voice controlled despite the tightening in his chest. The man wore silver cufflinks with blue stones that caught the light. You must remedy that, Vivian said. Nolan Blackwell has been such a dear friend to our family for years. Practically grew up with Diana. Vincent watched as Diana leaned in to whisper something to Nolan, their heads close together. The body language between them spoke volumes. I believe I'll get a refill first, Vincent said, lifting his still full glass and walking away. In the kitchen, he found Paul mixing drinks away from the crowd. You look like hell, Paul commented. Nolan Blackwell, Vincent said flatly. Tell me about him. Paul paused mid-pour. Why? Because my wife is practically draped over him in my living room, and I found his cufflink under our bed. Paul cursed under his breath. I try to tell you, Vince. Been trying for months. How long? At least a year, maybe longer. Diana and Nolan were high school sweethearts before she met you. Her parents always hoped they'd end up together, old money marrying old money. When Nolan took the position in Europe 8 years ago, I thought it was over. He returned 6 months ago. Vincent's hand tightened around his glass. And everyone knows, not everyone, but many suspect. Paul hesitated. The family has always been protective of Diana. They see you as temporary, Nolan as inevitable. The weight of this betrayal, not just by Diana, but by her entire family, settled over Vincent like concrete. He'd been building a life while they waited for it to crumble. I appreciate your honesty, Vincent said finally. What will you do? Vincent's eyes turned cold. Observe. For now. The next day, Diana gathered everyone in the grand living room for a special presentation. Vincent watched from the periphery as she stood before the assembled family, radiant in a blue dress that matched her eyes. Thank you all for coming to our home, Diana began. This reunion is special, not just a gathering, but a celebration of our family's history and connections. Assistants passed out leather-bound books to each family member. Vincent received his last. I've created memory books for everyone who matters, Diana announced with a smile. Each one is personalized with photos and memories specific to your place in our family. Vincent opened his book to find blank pages except for a sticky note that said, maybe try being present next year. He looked up to see Diana watching him, challenge in her eyes. The room fell silent as people noticed the exchange. Vincent felt dozens of eyes on him, waiting for his reaction, the outsider being publicly humiliated. Across the room, Nolan Blackwell smirked behind his champagne flute. Vincent closed the book calmly. Without a word, he placed it on a side table and walked out, ignoring the whispers that erupted behind him. He drove aimlessly for hours, the humiliation burning through him. When he finally returned home well after midnight, The house was quiet. He went to his study and locked the door, pulling out the evidence he'd been gathering. The Cufflink screenshots of text messages he'd discovered by accessing Diana's cloud backup, hotel receipts. Vincent had built his career by understanding structure, knowing exactly where pressure points existed and how much weight they could bear before failing. Now, he would apply that knowledge differently. It was time to design a collapse. Chapter 3. The Scream. The morning after the memory book incident, Vincent emptied Diana's side of their master bedroom closet. Every designer dress, every pair of shoes, every piece of jewelry he'd given her over 15 years, all removed. In their place, he installed a single, custom-made item. Then he left the house before dawn, telling no one where he was going. The reunion continued without him, the Lambert family filling his home with laughter that didn't include him. Diana made excuses for his absence. Her smile strained as relatives offered sympathy for her difficult marriage. Nolan Blackwell was particularly attentive, his hand finding the small of Diana's back when he thought no one was looking. What they didn't realize was that Vincent had installed new security cameras throughout the house before leaving. Cameras that fed directly to his private server. Vincent checked into the lakeside inn under a different name and watched the feed from his laptop. He saw Diana and Nolan slip into his home office after dinner, saw them kiss against his desk, heard Nolan say, "How much longer do we have to wait?" Diana's answer, "The paperwork is with my lawyer. Once it's filed, everything changes," confirmed what Vincent had suspected. She was planning to divorce him, likely taking half of everything he'd built. On the third morning, Vincent returned home before sunrise. Most guests were still asleep in the various guest rooms and cottages on the property. He entered silently, using his knowledge of which floorboards creaked to move through the house undetected. In the master bedroom, Diana slept alone, her face peaceful in the dim light. Vincent stood watching her for a long moment, remembering the woman he'd fallen in love with and wondering when she'd become this stranger. He left without waking her. Hours later, Diana opened her closet door and screamed so loudly that guests came running from all corners of the house. When they arrived, they found her staring in horror at a life-sized photograph hanging where her clothes had been. The image showed Diana and Nolan in an intimate embrace on the desk in Vincent's office, taken just the previous evening. Across the bottom in bold red lettering were the words, "Maybe try being loyal next year." But what truly horrified Diana wasn't just the exposure of her affair. It was the other items visible in the giant photograph. On Vincent's desk, clearly displayed, were documents, the same divorce papers she'd been secretly preparing, along with a prenuptial agreement she thought had been destroyed years ago. In the photo, these papers were organized neatly beside a folder labeled evidence that hadn't been there during her rendezvous with Nolan. Vincent had known everything, had been watching, planning. "What's happening?" Vivian Lambert demanded, pushing through the crowd to reach her daughter. She stopped short at the sight of the photograph, her face draining of color. "Where is Vincent?" Diana whispered, her voice shaking. As if summoned, Vincent appeared in the doorway, his expression unnervingly calm. The crowd parted silently as he walked to stand before his wife. "The reunion isn't over," he said quietly. "In fact, the real family gathering is just beginning." Diana's phone rang, cutting through the tension. She answered it with trembling hands. As she listened, her face crumpled. "What? That's impossible." When she hung up, she looked at Vincent with dawning horror. "What have you done?" "The Lambert Foundation accounts, they're frozen. Our family trust." "Not frozen," Vincent corrected. "Transferred. Temporarily. Just to get everyone's attention." Gasps rippled through the assembled relatives. "You can't do that." Nolan stepped forward, his confidence faltering under Vincent's cold stare. "I haven't done anything illegal, Nolan. Diana made me trustee of the family accounts 3 years ago during the tax restructuring. Her idea, ironically. I've simply moved assets to protect them while we sort out some discrepancies I've discovered." Vincent turned to address the stunned family. "I suggest everyone join me in the great room in 1 hour. I've prepared a presentation of my own." His eyes settled on Diana, a memory book of sorts for everyone who matters. As he walked away, Vincent heard his wife collapse in his sobs behind him. He felt nothing but a cold certainty that what he was about to do was justified. The Lamberts had considered him an outsider for 15 years. They were about to discover what that truly meant, because outsiders had nothing to lose. Chapter 4. The Architect's Blueprint. 1 hour later, the Lambert family gathered in the great room, their earlier festive mood replaced by anxious murmuring. Vincent had arranged the seating like a theater, with himself standing beside a large screen at the front. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, armor for the battle ahead. "Please, everyone take a seat," Vincent said, his voice carrying the same authoritative tone he used in business presentations. "What I'm about to share concerns all of you." Diana sat in the front row, her face pale, her mother beside her clutching her hand. Nolan had positioned himself strategically near the door, as if contemplating escape. "For 15 years, Vincent began, I've been part of this family in name, if never truly in spirit. The architect who built houses but was never welcomed home." He clicked a remote, and the screen displayed the Lambert family tree. "I studied this diagram when Diana and I first married. I memorized names, relationships, histories. I wanted to belong." The next slide showed photos of various family gatherings where Vincent stood slightly apart, his smile forced. Others turned away from him. "I accepted my role as outsider. But what I never accepted, what I will never accept, is betrayal." Vincent clicked again, and the photo of Diana and Nolan appeared on screen. A collective intake of breath filled the room. "An affair would have been painful enough," Vincent continued, his voice steady. "But this was more. This was a conspiracy." The next slides revealed text messages between Diana and various family members discussing Vincent as a temporary inconvenience, planning how his eventual departure would restore the natural order. Messages from Vivian to Diana. "Nolan has always been your future. Vincent was a rebellion." From cousins offering to hide assets before the split. From Diana's father discussing how to minimize what Vincent could claim. "You weren't just expecting our marriage to fail," Vincent said, looking directly at Vivian. "You were ensuring it." Diana stood up shakily. "Vincent, please." "I'm not finished," he cut her off, his voice sharp enough to make her sink back into her seat. "Each of you played a role in this deception, and now each of you will face consequences precisely matched to your involvement." He clicked to the next slide, which displayed the organizational chart of the Lambert family businesses and foundation. "As Diana's husband, I've been given surprising access over the years. Signatures on documents when Diana was too busy. Authority granted during tax restructuring. Power of attorney for certain accounts when international transfers were needed. Small things that seemed inconsequential at the time." Nolan stepped forward. "Whatever you think you've done, our lawyers will undo it by tomorrow." Vincent smiled thinly. "Your lawyers can certainly try. But understand this. I've spent 8 months preparing ever since I found this." He held up the bluestone cufflink. "Each step has been vetted by my own legal team to ensure it's reversible but time-consuming to unravel. I don't want your money. I want your attention." Paul, who had been watching silently from the side, finally spoke. "What exactly are you demanding, Vince?" "Honesty, accountability, and then separation. I'll release everything back to appropriate control once certain conditions are met." Vincent clicked to a new slide showing a document titled Separation Agreement. "This isn't a divorce settlement. It's a severing of ties with the entire Lambert family. Diana will retain ownership of her personal assets minus what she contributed to the deception fund against me. The foundation will undergo an independent audit, and every person in this room will sign a non-interference agreement, legally barring you from contact with me or any of my ventures going forward." The room erupted in outraged protests. Vincent let them continue for exactly 30 seconds before raising his hand. "You have 24 hours to agree to my terms. After that, I release evidence of certain irregularities I've discovered in the Foundation's offshore accounts to the appropriate authorities." Diana gasped. "You wouldn't. I didn't go looking for it," Vincent said quietly. "I was just being thorough. But once found, such information becomes a responsibility." Vivian stood up, her aristocratic face flushed with anger. "This is blackmail. This is architecture, Vincent corrected. I'm simply showing you the structural weaknesses in the house you built. You can choose to repair them properly, or he let the implication hang in the air. As the family dissolved into panicked discussions, Vincent walked calmly out of the room. He had prepared a small office in the boathouse by the lake where he would wait for their decision. As he crossed the lawn, he heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Paul following. "That was brutal," Paul said when he caught up. "But necessary," Vincent replied. "For what it's worth, I never knew how deep it went. The messages, the planning." Paul shook his head. "I knew about the affair, not the conspiracy." Vincent studied his brother-in-law, the one Lambert who had ever treated him with genuine respect. "I believe you. That's why your name isn't on my list." Paul looked relieved, then troubled. "What happened to you, Vince? The man I knew wouldn't go this far." Vincent gazed out at the lake, its surface deceptively smooth despite the currents beneath. "The man you knew discovered that while he was building a life, others were designing its collapse. It changes your perspective." In the boathouse, Vincent sat at his makeshift desk and opened his laptop. On screen was a program showing 24 countdowns, one for each member of the Lambert family involved in the conspiracy. Beside each name was a folder containing the specific evidence he'd use if they refused his terms. This wasn't just revenge. It was recalibration, a lesson in consequences. Vincent checked his watch. 23 hours and 42 minutes remained. Chapter 5. The Counterattack. Night fell over the lake house, but few among the Lamberts found rest. Lights burned in every corner of the property as urgent conversations continued. Vincent observed it all from his boathouse sanctuary, where security feeds showed him the aftermath of his revelation. Diana paced in their bedroom, alternating between tearful phone calls to family lawyers and angry confrontations with Nolan, whose confident facade had crumbled under pressure. Vivian Lambert had assembled the family elders in the dining room, their hushed deliberations punctuated by occasional shouts. Shortly after midnight, Vincent's secure phone rang, a line known only to his most trusted associates. "It's done," said the voice on the other end. "All electronic devices belonging to the primary targets have been successfully cloned. Live monitoring is active." "And the backup files?" Vincent asked. "Secured at all 3 locations. Even if they find one, the others remain protected." "Thank you, Mira." Vincent ended the call. Mira Vega had been Vincent's head of security for 5 years, originally hired to protect his architectural designs from corporate espionage. Now her skills served a more personal mission. She was one of 3 people Vincent trusted implicitly, people who had no connection to the Lamberts. At 3:17 a.m., Vincent's monitoring system alerted him to movement on the property. Diana was walking purposefully toward the boathouse, alone. Vincent considered his options, then unlocked the door remotely, watching her approach on camera. She entered looking exhausted, her earlier polish gone. "We need to talk," she said, taking in the Spartan setup of his temporary command center. "I believe I was clear earlier," Vincent replied. "You have," he checked his watch, 20 hours and 14 minutes to provide written acceptance of my terms. "You've lost your mind," Diana said, her voice rising. "Do you understand what you're doing? These are powerful people with connections everywhere. These are people who conspired against me for years while eating at my table and sleeping under my roof." Vincent countered, his calm unbroken. "And you led them." Diana's expression shifted, calculation replacing outrage. "Vincent," she said, her voice softening as she moved closer. "We can work this out, just the 2 of us. Whatever you think you saw or heard." "Stop." Vincent's voice cut like a blade. "You're wearing the same perfume you wore the night we met. The same earrings I gave you on our 10th anniversary. Your hair is down the way I always preferred. You've adjusted your strategy from confrontation to seduction in the time it took to walk from the house to here." Diana froze, caught in her manipulation. "I've watched you perform for 15 years, Diana. I know all your scenes by heart." Her facade crumbled. "Fine. Let's be honest then. You want to know why I turned to Nolan? Because he sees me, the real me, not just some trophy or accessory to his success." "Is that what you told yourself?" Vincent asked. That I saw you as an accessory? I built my life around you. Designed homes with your preferences in mind. Created spaces for the family we never had because your career always came first. A family? Diana laughed bitterly. You were never home long enough to have a family. Always another project, another city. And yet somehow, Nolan found you during those absences. Curious how that worked. Diana's eyes narrowed. What does that mean? Vincent opened a drawer and removed a thin file. 3 years ago, I was approached about a major project in Singapore. Career-defining. I turned it down because you had just taken over as director of the foundation and needed me here. 6 months later, the Milan project came up. Less prestigious, but requiring frequent travel. You insisted I take it. He slid the file toward her. Inside were emails between Diana and Nolan, dated before the Milan project was ever offered. You created my absences, Diana. Arranged them through your father's business connections. You manufactured the very distance you then used to justify your betrayal. Diana stared at the evidence, her carefully constructed narrative collapsing. How long have you known? Does it matter? Vincent closed the file. What matters is what happens now. And what is that exactly? Her voice had turned cold. You destroy my family out of spite. No, I offer terms that are actually quite reasonable, given the circumstances. You and your family sever all connections with me and my business interests. I return control of the foundation and accounts. We all move forward separately. Diana studied him. And if we refuse, then I do what any responsible citizen would do when they discover financial irregularities in a charitable foundation. I report them. You'd really do that? After 15 years. Vincent met her gaze steadily. 15 years during which you and your family plotted against me? Yes, I would. Diana stood, smoothing her clothes with practiced composure. You've changed, Vincent. No, he corrected. I've finally seen clearly. There's a difference. As she reached the door, he added, one more thing, Diana. The house is mine. Solely. Check the deed you signed 3 years ago when we refinanced. Another detail you overlooked while focusing on your extraction plan. Diana's face showed genuine shock for the first time. That's impossible. It's architecture, Vincent replied. The details matter. After she left, Vincent allowed himself a moment of exhaustion. He had expected Diana's midnight approach, had prepared for it, but the emotional toll was still significant. What he hadn't expected was the knock that came just 30 minutes later. This time, it was Nolan Blackwell who entered the boathouse, his handsome face set in determined lines. I've come to make a deal, he said without preamble. Vincent leaned back in his chair. You have nothing I want. I have information about who else was involved. Things even you don't know. Nolan's confidence was returning. Diana isn't the mastermind you think. There are others who've been working against you from the beginning. Vincent studied the man who had been sleeping with his wife. You'd betray the Lamberts to save yourself. I'd provide additional context that might influence how you distribute consequences, Nolan corrected smoothly. For appropriate considerations. Vincent almost admired the man's shamelessness. What kind of considerations? Immunity from whatever you're planning. A guarantee that my name stays out of any public disclosures. And, Nolan hesitated, then plunged ahead, access to your Singapore contacts. I know you turned down the project, but you made connections there. The request confirmed what Vincent had suspected. Nolan wasn't just after Diana. He was after Vincent's professional network, his hard-earned business relationships. Sit down, Vincent said, gesturing to a chair. Tell me about these others I don't know about. For the next hour, Vincent listened as Nolan detailed a wider conspiracy than even he had uncovered, involving Diana's cousins in banking, her father's political connections, even Paul's wife, Melissa. With each revelation, Nolan grew more animated, clearly believing he was purchasing his immunity. When Nolan finally finished, Vincent nodded thoughtfully. That's very comprehensive. So we have a deal? Nolan asked eagerly. No. Vincent pressed a key on his laptop, and a room filled with the playback of Nolan's entire confession. But I appreciate your contribution to my evidence file. Nolan's face contorted with fury. You son of a... I choose my next words carefully, Vincent interrupted. Everything in this room is being recorded. And unlike you, I only make deals I intend to honor. After Nolan stormed out, Vincent sent the recording to his secure server and updated his countdown files with the new information. The architect's blueprint was becoming more detailed by the hour. As dawn broke over the lake, Vincent watched the main house through his window. One by one, lights were turning on as the Lamberts faced the day of decision. Their 24 hours were half gone, and the foundation of their carefully constructed world was already showing cracks. Chapter 6: The Revelation. By mid-afternoon, the tension at the lake house had reached a breaking point. Vincent's monitoring showed the Lamberts divided into factions. Those who wanted to fight, led by Vivian. Those who wanted to settle, including most of the younger generation who feared for their inheritances, and a smaller group, including Diana's father Howard, who were suspiciously quiet. Vincent had expected this fracturing. The Lamberts had always maintained a facade of family unity, but beneath it ran currents of competition and self-interest. Under pressure, those currents were becoming riptides. What he hadn't expected was the black sedan that arrived at the property gate at precisely 2 p.m. The security feed showed a woman in her 60s emerging from the back seat, a woman Vincent recognized immediately despite having met her only twice before. Eleanor Lambert, Diana's grandmother and the true matriarch of the family. According to Diana, Eleanor had retired to Switzerland years ago, removing herself from family affairs. Yet here she was, moving with the purposeful stride of someone accustomed to command, flanked by two men who were clearly more than drivers. Vincent watched as the Lamberts scrambled to greet her, their faces showing varying degrees of surprise and concern. He turned up the audio feed from the main hall. Enough of this circus. Eleanor's voice was clear and commanding. "Where is Vincent Harlow?" Diana stepped forward. "Grandma, you shouldn't have come. Your health is fine." Eleanor cut her off. "I've spent 10 hours on a plane because my family is too incompetent to handle a single architect without creating a spectacle. Now, where is he?" Vincent smiled despite himself. He'd always wondered where Diana's steel came from. Now he knew. He sent a text to the phone of Eleanor's driver, the boathouse. "Come alone." 15 minutes later, Eleanor Lambert entered Vincent's temporary headquarters, declining his offer of assistance with a wave of her hand. She surveyed the space with shrewd eyes before settling into the chair across from him. "Mr. Harlow," she said, "it seems you've caused quite a commotion in my family." "Mrs. Lambert," Vincent acknowledged. "An unexpected pleasure." Eleanor snorted. "Save the pleasantries. I'm told you've frozen our foundation, threatened my grandchildren with financial ruin, and turned my granddaughter's affair into a public spectacle. Normally, I would have my lawyers bury you." She paused, studying him. "But I've always believed in understanding one's adversaries directly." "A philosophy I share," Vincent replied. "Then understand this. The Lambert legacy spans 5 generations. It has weathered wars, depressions, and scandals that would destroy lesser families. Whatever grievance you have with Diana or her parents, the foundation serves thousands through its charitable works. Are you prepared to damage that legacy for revenge?" Vincent considered his response carefully. Eleanor Lambert was not someone to underestimate. "With respect, Mrs. Lambert, I'm not the one who put the foundation at risk. The irregularities I discovered in the offshore accounts, the commingling of personal expenses with charitable funds, the undisclosed transfers, those existed before I found them." Eleanor's expression didn't change, but Vincent noticed her fingers tighten slightly on her cane. "What exactly did you find?" Instead of answering directly, Vincent turned his laptop toward her. On screen was a folder labeled Foundation Audit. "This contains everything." The creative accounting began 3 years ago, primarily through accounts managed by Howard and Vivian. Diana either didn't notice or chose not to question it. Eleanor reviewed the documents silently, her face growing more severe with each page. After 10 minutes, she closed the laptop with a decisive movement. "How many people know about this?" "Currently? Just me, my legal team, and now you." Eleanor nodded slowly. "And your demands?" "I understand there's a separation agreement. Complete severing of ties between myself and the Lambert family. Return of certain personal assets. Non-interference clauses. All quite standard for a situation like this. There is no standard for a situation like this, Mr. Harlow, Eleanor said dryly. But your terms are more reasonable than I expected. She tapped her cane thoughtfully. What about Diana? Diana receives what she brought into the marriage, minus funds used in planning against me. The house remains mine, as per the deed she signed. No alimony, no ongoing financial entanglements. And you believe she'll accept this? Vincent's expression hardened. She has approximately 8 hours to decide. After that, the irregularities I discovered become matters of public record. Eleanor studied him with new intensity. You're not bluffing. No. May I ask a personal question, Mr. Harlow? Vincent inclined his head in permission. Did you ever love my granddaughter? The question caught him off guard. He considered deflecting, but found himself answering honestly. Yes, deeply, for many years. And now I see her clearly. Eleanor nodded, seeming to find something satisfactory in his answer. She rose to her feet with surprising grace for her age. I'll need copies of those files. Vincent raised an eyebrow. May I ask why? Because, Mr. Harlow, while you've been planning your revenge, you've overlooked something important. The foundation isn't just Diana's concern or Howard's pet project. It's my life's work. Her voice took on a harder edge. And I do not appreciate discovering that my son and his wife have been using it as their personal piggy bank. Vincent felt a shift in the dynamic between them. You didn't know? No, Eleanor admitted. I've been semi-retired for 5 years, serving as chairman emeritus, but leaving daily operations to the next generation. Clearly, that was a mistake. She extended her hand. The files, please. Vincent transferred copies to a secure drive and handed it to her. What will you do? My family will sign your separation agreement, Eleanor said decisively. Every one of them, including Diana. You'll release the foundation funds back to proper control. My control, not Howard's or Vivian's. And the irregularities you discovered will be corrected internally, without public disclosure. And why would I agree to that modification? Eleanor's smile was thin. Because, Mr. Harlow, I can offer you something more valuable than public vindication. I can offer you the truth about your marriage, a truth even you haven't discovered yet. Vincent felt a chill of premonition. What truth? Sign these revised terms first, Eleanor said, producing a document from her handbag. Then we'll talk. Vincent reviewed the modifications, minor adjustments to the foundation oversight provisions, a clause establishing Eleanor as interim director during restructuring, and a confidentiality agreement covering the financial irregularities. The core of his demands remained intact. He signed. Eleanor took the document and nodded with satisfaction. A wise decision. She moved toward the door, then paused. Come to the main house at 7 p.m. The family will be assembled. Bring your files, all of them. After the signing, we'll have our private conversation. And if I find your truth insufficient, Eleanor's eyes were suddenly cold. Mr. Harlow, in my 82 years, I have never failed to deliver on a promise. The truth I offer will change how you see everything that's happened, including your own role in it. After she left, Vincent sat motionless, replaying their conversation. Eleanor Lambert was everything Diana had described years ago, formidable, shrewd, and utterly in command. But what truth could she possibly reveal that he hadn't already uncovered in his months of investigation? At his computer, Vincent made a final review of his evidence files. Each Lambert family member had their own folder containing specific evidence of their involvement in the conspiracy against him. Diana's was the largest, Vivian's a close second. Howard's contained primarily financial documents. Paul's was nearly empty, confirming his limited involvement. Vincent had been meticulous, leaving nothing to chance. Yet Eleanor's confidence suggested he had missed something crucial. At precisely 7 p.m., Vincent entered the main house for the first time since his initial confrontation with the family. He carried a secure briefcase containing backup drives of all his evidence. The great room had been transformed into something resembling a corporate boardroom, with the Lambert family seated around a long table. Eleanor sat at the head, Diana to her right, Howard and Vivian to her left. The atmosphere was funereal as Vincent took his designated seat at the opposite end of the table. Before him lay multiple copies of his separation agreement, modified as per his arrangement with Eleanor. "We are gathered to resolve the unfortunate situation that has developed," Eleanor began, her voice commanding instant attention. "Each person at this table will sign the agreement before them. There will be no discussion, no negotiation, and no dramatics. Is that clear?" The family murmured their assent, though Vivian looked ready to object until silenced by Eleanor's pointed stare. "Vincent has agreed that upon execution of these documents, all financial controls will be returned to the Foundation under my direct oversight. All evidence of certain irregularities will remain confidential, provided the terms of this agreement are strictly observed going forward." One by one, the Lamberts signed the documents passing around the table. Diana's hand trembled slightly as she added her signature, her eyes never meeting Vincent's. Nolan, seated at the far corner, signed last, his expression a mixture of resentment and relief. "It is done," Eleanor announced when the last copy reached her. She handed the stack to one of her assistants, who promptly left the room. "Now, I must ask everyone except Vincent and Diana to leave us. What follows is a private family matter." Vivian began to protest, but Howard gripped her arm, shaking his head slightly. The room emptied until only Vincent, Diana, and Eleanor remained. "Grandmother, I don't understand," Diana said, her voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "No, you don't," Eleanor agreed. "Neither of you do. But it's time you did." She opened a slender folder she'd kept beside her throughout the meeting. "Vincent, in your investigation of my family's conspiracy against you, did you ever wonder why they were so determined to see your marriage end?" "I assumed they never accepted me," Vincent replied. "I wasn't from their world." A reasonable assumption, but incomplete. Eleanor removed a document from the folder. "This is a genetic test conducted 15 years ago, shortly before you and Diana became engaged." Diana gasped. "Grandma, no." "Silence," Eleanor commanded. "This deception has gone on long enough." She slid the document toward Vincent. "My son Howard was adopted as an infant, a fact known only within the family. His birth parents were ordinary people, a factory worker and a waitress. When Howard and his wife had Diana, they raised her as a Lambert in every way, including the family's obsession with bloodlines and heritage." Vincent scanned the document, beginning to understand where this was headed. "When Diana became serious about marrying you," Eleanor continued, "Howard insisted on a background check, standard practice for Lambert in-laws. That investigation revealed something unexpected." She paused, meeting Vincent's eyes directly. "Your father, Richard Harlow, was Howard's biological half-brother." The revelation landed like a physical blow. Vincent stared at Eleanor, then at Diana, who had buried her face in her hands. "You're saying Diana and I are first cousins once removed?" Eleanor confirmed. "Not close enough for legal prohibition in most states, but close enough to violate the Lambert obsession with genetic distance in marriage. Close enough that Howard and Vivian were horrified." "They knew," Vincent whispered. "All this time they knew." "Yes." "They opposed the marriage privately, but feared the scandal of revealing why. When you persisted, they reluctantly agreed, believing the marriage would eventually fail naturally." "But it didn't," Diana said, finally looking up. Her face was streaked with tears. "We were happy, Vincent. For years, we were happy. Until Nolan returned," Vincent said, the pieces falling into place. "And your parents saw an opportunity to correct what they viewed as a mistake." Eleanor nodded. "They encouraged the reconnection, facilitated meetings, created opportunities. Not just because they preferred Nolan's pedigree, but because they truly believed ending your marriage was correcting a wrong." Vincent sat back, absorbing the implications. "Did you know Diana? About our connection?" Diana shook her head, her eyes pleading. "Not until after we were married. Mother told me during an argument 2 years in. She said explained why we couldn't." She faltered. "Couldn't have children," Vincent finished for her. "The years of fertility treatments, the disappointments, the eventual decision to stop trying, all cast in a new and disturbing light. "I wanted to tell you," Diana whispered, "but I was afraid you'd leave." And then as time passed, it seemed impossible to explain why I'd kept it secret. Eleanor closed her folder. "I've stayed out of my family's affairs too long, allowing Howard and Vivian's obsessions to poison everything they touch. That ends today." She fixed Diana with a stern gaze. "Your behavior has been inexcusable, regardless of your parents' manipulation. You betrayed a good man." Diana lowered her eyes, unable to argue. Eleanor turned to Vincent. "And you, Mr. Harlow, have orchestrated a masterful revenge. One that, I must admit, my family deserved." She rose from her seat. "I'll leave you two now. What happens next is entirely your decision." After Eleanor departed, Vincent and Diana sat in silence, the weight of revelation settling between them. "Did you ever love me?" Vincent finally asked, echoing Eleanor's earlier question to him. "Or was I always just a rebellion against your family?" Diana looked at him, her facade completely gone. "I loved you more than I've ever loved anyone." That wasn't a lie. Vincent nodded slowly. "And Nolan? An escape," she admitted. "From guilt. From a secret. From watching you build houses for children we'd never have." Her voice broke. "From looking into your eyes every day, knowing my family saw our marriage as something shameful." Vincent gathered his files and stood. The anger that had fueled him for months felt different now. Not gone, but transformed. "I'm leaving tomorrow. The house is yours until the divorce is finalized." "Vincent," Diana called as he reached the door, "what will you do about the foundation irregularities, now that you know everything?" He paused, considering. "I'll honor my agreement with Eleanor. The evidence stays private as long as the terms are kept." He turned to face his wife one last time. Some family secrets should remain buried. As Vincent walked away, he realized the true architecture of his revenge had just revealed itself. Not in the public humiliation of the Lamberts, not in the financial leverage he'd engineered, but in this moment, choosing to walk away with his dignity intact, leaving them to face the wreckage of their deceptions alone. It wasn't forgiveness. Vincent Harlow did not forgive betrayal, but it was something else, something that would allow him to rebuild without the weight of hatred. Or so he thought. Chapter 7. The Empty Frame. 6 months after the Lambert family reunion, Vincent Harlow sat in his downtown penthouse office, reviewing plans for a new sustainable housing development. The divorce had been finalized 3 months earlier with surprising efficiency. Diana had not contested any of his terms. The Lambert family had honored their agreement, maintaining their distance from both his personal and professional life. Vincent had thrown himself into work, expanding his firm internationally and focusing on projects with social impact. Outwardly, he appeared to have moved on completely. Those who knew him before noted a new hardness beneath his professional demeanor, but attributed it to the natural aftermath of a difficult divorce. Only Vincent knew that beneath his composed exterior, a final phase of his plan was unfolding, one that Eleanor Lambert's revelations had not deterred but rather refined. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Mira Vega entered, closing the door carefully behind her. "It's confirmed," she said without preamble. "The Lambert Foundation fundraising gala is scheduled for next Friday at the Metropolitan. All primary targets will be in attendance." Vincent nodded. "And our access?" "Secured. The new security company they hired after firing their previous team is actually a subsidiary of ours, operating under a different name. The staff has been infiltrated as planned. The digital assets, ready for deployment. Once activated, the presentation will override their planned program. There's no way to stop once it begins." Vincent studied the architectural renderings on his desk, not of buildings, but of destruction. A different kind of blueprint. "And there's no way to trace it back to us?" Mira shook her head. "The system is designed to self-destruct after execution. All paths lead to internal Lambert servers. They'll suspect, of course, but they can't prove anything." "Good," Vincent said. "Proceed as planned." After Mira left, Vincent moved to the window overlooking the city. The conversation with Eleanor had changed his understanding of the conspiracy against him, but not his determination to see justice done. The Lamberts had manipulated his entire marriage, treated him as genetically tainted, conspired to remove him, all while smiling at his dinner table. The agreement he'd signed protected them from exposure of the financial irregularities he'd discovered, but it said nothing about their other secrets. Vincent opened his private safe and removed a small object wrapped in velvet cloth. Unwrapping it revealed a sterling silver picture frame, elegant but empty. No photograph, just vacant space behind the glass. He'd commissioned it specially, an exact replica of the frames the Lamberts used for their family portraits. He traced its edge thoughtfully. 1 week until the gala. 1 week until the Lamberts understood that some debts could never be paid in full. On the night of the gala, Vincent did not attend in person. Instead, he watched remotely from a hotel suite across town, surrounded by monitors showing various angles of the Metropolitan's Grand Ballroom. The Lambert Foundation's annual fundraiser was their most prestigious event, attended by New York's elite and covered by society press. This year's theme was Legacy and Future, a celebration of the Foundation's history under the renewed leadership of Eleanor Lambert. Vincent observed the arrivals with clinical detachment. Howard and Vivian Lambert, looking slightly diminished from their positions of influence. Various cousins and extended family, still wealthy, but more cautious after the financial restructuring Eleanor had imposed. Nolan Blackwell, now officially engaged to Diana after a suspiciously brief courtship following her divorce. And finally, Diana herself, resplendent in a gown that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her smile practiced as she greeted donors and posed for photographs. To anyone else, she appeared the perfect philanthropic heiress. To Vincent, who knew every micro-expression of her face, she looked haunted. All systems ready, came Myra's voice through his earpiece. She was on site, disguised as catering staff. Program begins in 15 minutes. Vincent checked his watch. Proceed. The gala's formal program began with Eleanor Lambert taking the stage to welcome guests. At 82, she remained commanding, her voice strong as she spoke of the Foundation's renewed commitment to transparency and impact. Tonight is about honoring our past while embracing our future, Eleanor said, unaware that her carefully planned speech was about to be derailed. The Lambert legacy continues through our work in communities across. The lights dimmed unexpectedly. The large screens flanking the stage, intended to show a promotional video about the Foundation's accomplishments, flickered and went dark momentarily. When they illuminated again, they displayed something entirely different. A series of family photographs began to appear, cycling slowly across the screens. Innocuous at first, Lambert family gatherings, charity events, vacation photos, images that have been collected from various sources, including social media accounts and private servers. Then the tone shifted. The photos began to include text overlays, excerpts from private emails, text messages, and recorded conversations. The conspiracy against Vincent unfolded in public view, each family member's role detailed with damning specificity. The audience murmured in confusion, then shock, as the presentation continued. Howard Lambert instructing Nolan on how to reconnect with Diana. Vivian Lambert discussing the genetic situation with a family doctor. Diana arranging Vincent's business trips to coincide with her meetings with Nolan. The Lambert family on stage froze in horror as their private manipulations played out before New York's elite. Security personnel scrambled to shut down the system, but found themselves locked out. Then came the final section, documentation of the Lambert Foundation's financial irregularities. Not the offshore accounts Vincent had promised to keep secret, but other improprieties he'd discovered during his investigation. Personal expenses disguised as charitable outlays. Tax anomalies. Conflicts of interest. Nothing overtly illegal, but deeply embarrassing and potentially damaging to the Foundation's reputation. The screens went dark momentarily, then showed a single image, an empty silver picture frame. Below it, a simple message, the true Lambert legacy. In his hotel suite, Vincent watched Eleanor Lambert's face as she realized what had happened and who was responsible. Despite her age, she moved with remarkable speed, taking command of the situation, ordering the room cleared of press, instructing staff to collect phones from guests. But it was too late. The damage was done. In the age of smartphones and social media, containment was impossible. Already, Vincent could see guests surreptitiously recording, texting, posting. The Lambert reputation, built over generations and fiercely protected, was collapsing in real time. Vincent closed his laptop and poured himself a measure of whiskey. The execution had been flawless. No technical glitches, no premature exposure, no traceable connection to him. And he had kept his promise to Eleanor, technically. The specific offshore account irregularities remained confidential. He had simply exposed everything else. His phone rang, a private number few people possessed. Vincent answered, already knowing who it would be. "You broke our agreement," Eleanor Lambert said, her voice tight with controlled fury. "I honored every word," Vincent replied calmly. "Review the document." I agreed not to disclose the specific financial irregularities we discussed. I made no promises about other discoveries or about the family's personal conduct. A long silence followed. "I underestimated you, Mr. Harlow. A common mistake in your family. This vindictiveness doesn't suit the man I met 6 months ago. The man who seemed ready to walk away with dignity." Vincent's voice hardened. "That man learned something important after your revelation, Mrs. Lambert. He learned that your family didn't just conspire against him out of snobbery or social climbing. They conspired because they believed he was genetically inferior, tainted by connection to the very bloodline they protected so fiercely." Another silence, then. "What do you want now? More money? Control of the foundation?" "I want nothing from you. Not anymore." Tonight wasn't about leverage or negotiation. It was about truth. The truth your family tried to bury for generations. That your precious legacy is built on hypocrisy and manipulation. Eleanor's voice, when she finally spoke again, contained something Vincent had never heard before: defeat. "I hope this brings you peace, Vincent. Somehow, I doubt it will." After she hung up, Vincent stood motionless, the triumph he'd anticipated feeling strangely hollow. He moved to the window and gazed out at the city lights, wondering if Eleanor was right. Would this final act of revenge bring closure, or merely extend the architecture of destruction to include himself? His reflection stared back at him from the window glass, harder, colder than the man who had once designed homes for a family he would never have. The man who had loved Diana despite everything. Vincent touched his reflection, tracing the outlines of the stranger he had become. Then he turned away, removing the empty silver frame from his briefcase and placing on the desk. A reminder of what had been lost and what had been gained. The empty frame. The final blueprint. The architect's revenge. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. 3 days after the Lambert Foundation Gala, the fallout had exceeded even Vincent's carefully calculated expectations. Society pages and financial news outlets ran exposés on the family's internal manipulations and questionable foundation practices. Donors publicly distanced themselves. Board members resigned. The family's carefully curated image of philanthropic nobility lay in ruins. Vincent monitored it all from his office, where he had returned to work as if nothing unusual had occurred. He took no outward pleasure in the Lamberts' downfall, maintaining the appearance of a man focused solely on his expanding architectural empire. But privately, he recorded every development, adding each article and social media reaction to a digital archive, a museum of consequences that only he would ever visit. On the 4th day, Paul Lambert appeared unannounced at Vincent's office. His former brother-in-law looked haggard, the strain of recent events evident in his face. "You shouldn't be here," Vincent said, not offering a seat. "The non-interference agreement is the least of my concerns right now," Paul interrupted. "Eleanor Lambert died last night." Vincent felt an unexpected jolt. "What happened?" "Stroke. The doctors say the stress of the past few days accelerated her decline." Paul's expression was a mixture of grief and accusation. "Her last coherent words were about you." Vincent moved to the window, processing this unplanned consequence. Eleanor Lambert had been a formidable opponent, but not his target for destruction. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Paul asked. Because from where I'm standing, this looks like exactly what you wanted. The complete dismantling of the Lambert family. Vincent turned to face him. Eleanor made her choices, as did all of you. She could have exposed the conspiracy years ago. Instead, she allowed it to continue until it threatened her legacy. She was 82 years old, Vincent. Whatever you think of the rest of us, she didn't deserve this end. Vincent felt a flicker of something uncomfortably like remorse, quickly suppressed. Why are you really here, Paul? To make me feel guilty. Paul sighed heavily. I honestly don't know. Maybe to understand. The Vincent I knew, the man I considered a friend, wouldn't have gone this far. The Vincent you knew discovered that his entire marriage was built on a foundation of lies. That his wife's family considered him genetically tainted. That his brother-in-law knew and said nothing. I told you about the affair, Paul protested, but not about why my in-laws were so determined to end my marriage. Not about my biological connection to Howard. Not about the years of manipulation. Vincent's voice remained calm, but his eyes were cold. You let me believe it was simple elitism, not eugenics. Paul looked away, unable to deny the accusation. What happens now? With Eleanor gone, Howard takes control of the family interests again. He's already talking about retaliation. Against me? Vincent raised an eyebrow. I suggest he consult his lawyers first. I still have evidence I didn't release. This won't end, will it? The damage will just keep spreading. Vincent returned to his desk, a clear dismissal. You made your choice years ago, Paul. You chose your blood family over truth. Now live with the consequences, as I have lived with mine. After Paul left, Vincent sat motionless, Eleanor's death casting an unexpected shadow over his victory. He had planned for every contingency except this. The death of the one Lambert he had developed a grudging respect for. That evening, Vincent received a message from Diana. I need to see you. One last time. He almost ignored it. Their divorce was final, their lives separated. But curiosity, and something else he refused to name, made him agree to meet at a neutral location, a quiet bar in Tribeca known for its privacy. Diana arrived, looking nothing like the polished socialite from the gala. Her face was bare of makeup, her clothing simple, her eyes shadowed by grief. She slid into the booth across from Vincent without greeting. Grandmother's funeral is on Sunday, she said after ordering a whiskey. The family is in chaos. Father is drinking again. Mother hasn't left her room in 2 days. I didn't intend for Eleanor to die, Vincent said, surprising himself with the admission. Diana studied him. But you intended everything else. Yes. Why? After the divorce, after the separation agreement. Why wasn't that enough? Vincent considered his answer carefully. There are betrayals that change who you are at a fundamental level. Your family didn't just end our marriage, Diana. They made a mockery of 15 years of my life. They decided my genetic connection to Howard made me unworthy, while presenting themselves as paragons of moral authority. And now you've destroyed that authority completely. Diana's voice was hollow. Congratulations. Don't pretend you were an innocent bystander, Vincent said, his tone hardening. You knew about our connection for 13 years and said nothing. You let me believe our fertility issues were bad luck or biology, not your deliberate choice based on genetic fears. You orchestrated my business travel to facilitate your affair. Diana flinched but didn't deny it. I've lost everything, Vincent. Is that enough for you? You haven't lost everything. You still have Nolan, your trust fund, your family name, tarnished but intact. Nolan left yesterday, Diana said quietly, when the foundation scandal threatened his own business interests. It turns out his devotion had practical limits. Vincent felt no satisfaction at this news, only a distant acknowledgement of its inevitability. I'm sorry. Are you? Diana laughed bitterly. This is exactly what you planned. No, Vincent corrected. I plan to expose the truth. The consequences are the natural result of your family's actions, not my design. They sat in silence, the weight of their shared history filling the space between them. Finally, Diana spoke again, her voice softer. Do you remember the house you designed for us in the early years? The one with the nursery overlooking the garden? Vincent nodded. It had been his most personal project, a home designed specifically for the family they planned to have. They had sold it after 5 years of failing to conceive, the empty nursery a constant reminder of what they couldn't achieve. I went back there last week, Diana continued. The new owners let me see it. They've turned the nursery into a home office. All traces of our dreams gone. She looked up, her eyes bright with unshed tears. That's what you've done to my family, Vincent. You've erased our legacy, turned it into something unrecognizable. Your family did that themselves, Vincent replied, unmoved. I simply held up a mirror. Diana studied him, really seeing him perhaps for the first time since their separation. You've changed. There's nothing left of the man I married. That man died the day he discovered his marriage was a sham. Diana finished her drink and stood. Goodbye, Vincent. I won't contact you again. She paused before leaving, reaching into her purse to withdraw a small object wrapped in tissue paper. She placed it on the table without explanation and walked away. After she was gone, Vincent unwrapped the package. Inside was a silver cufflink with a distinctive blue stone, the match to the one he'd found under their bed all those months ago. With it was a note in Diana's handwriting. Some patterns can't be broken. Some architecture can't be redesigned. Vincent stared at the cufflink, understanding the message. Diana was acknowledging the symmetry of their destruction, how they had broken each other in ways that could never be repaired. That night, in his penthouse, Vincent opened his private safe and took out the empty silver frame. He placed the cufflink inside, behind the glass, a small, glittering artifact of everything he had lost and everything he had destroyed. A memorial to victory, a monument to emptiness. The architect's final design. Chapter 9. The Legacy. 1 year to the day after the Lambert Foundation Gala, Vincent Harlow stood on the observation deck of his newest project, a striking mixed-use tower that architectural critics were already hailing as revolutionary. From this height, the city sprawled before him, a testament to human ambition and design. His professional success had reached unprecedented levels in the past year. The publicity surrounding his divorce and the subsequent Lambert scandal had paradoxically enhanced his reputation. The brilliant architect who had survived a conspiracy by one of the city's most powerful families. New clients sought him out, fascinated by both his designs and his mythology. Vincent had leveraged this interest strategically, focusing his firm on sustainable development projects that would outlast scandal and gossip. His name would be attached to structures that improve communities, not just adorn skylines. It was a legacy built on creation rather than destruction. Yet despite his professional triumphs, Vincent lived a deliberately solitary existence. He maintained no social media presence. He declined interviews about his personal life. He attended industry functions only when absolutely necessary, arriving late and leaving early, avoiding the inevitable questions about the Lamberts. The few who worked closely with him noted how he had changed, still brilliant, still demanding excellence, but with a coldness that hadn't existed before. The architect had rebuilt himself as meticulously as he designed his buildings, eliminating vulnerabilities, reinforcing boundaries. Today, however, was different. Today, Vincent had agreed to the one meeting he had been avoiding for months. "Impressive view," came a voice behind him. Howard Lambert emerged from the elevator, looking older than his 65 years. The scandal had accelerated his aging, deepening the lines in his face, whitening his hair almost completely. "Thank you for meeting me," Howard said when Vincent didn't immediately respond. Vincent nodded, maintaining his position at the glass wall. "Your message said it was important." "It is." Howard moved to stand beside him, gazing out at the city. "The Lambert Foundation is being dissolved. After Eleanor's death and the revelations, the board voted for complete disbandment. The remaining assets will be distributed among other charitable organizations." Vincent absorbed this information without visible reaction. A practical solution. Yes. Howard seemed to gather himself before continuing. "I'm dying, Vincent. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe less." This did elicit a response. Vincent turned to study his former father-in-law, the man who had orchestrated much of the conspiracy against him, the man who shared his blood through a connection neither had known about until it was too late. "I'm sorry to hear that," Vincent said finally, and meant it. Death had a way of putting even the most elaborate revenge into perspective. "Before I go, I needed to tell you something. Something even Eleanor didn't know." Howard's hands trembled slightly as he gripped the railing. "The genetic test, the one that showed our biological connection, it was wrong." Vincent went very still. "What are you saying?" "After you and Diana became engaged, I had the test done privately. The results showed we shared a paternal bloodline. I was disturbed. The Lamberts have always been obsessed with genetic distance in marriage. It's an old family neurosis dating back generations." Howard took a labored breath before continuing. "I told Vivian and a few others. We agreed Diana couldn't know. She was too much in love with you to be rational. We thought the marriage would naturally fail given the pressures of your career and Diana's social obligations. But it didn't," Vincent said, his voice dangerously quiet. "No, you were surprisingly compatible. When Diana confided in us about your fertility issues years later, I saw an opportunity. I suggested more tests. Vivian told Diana about our supposed connection, implying it explained your conception difficulties." Vincent's hands clenched. "You manipulated your own daughter into believing she couldn't safely have children with her husband?" Howard didn't flinch from the accusation. "Yes, it's the worst thing I've ever done. And the test was wrong. I had another done 3 months ago, after a confrontation with Diana following the foundation scandal. She demanded the truth about everything. This test was more comprehensive, using newer technology." Howard reached into his jacket and removed a document. "We aren't related, Vincent. Different genetic markers entirely. The original test had a sampling error." Vincent took the paper, scanning the technical details with growing comprehension. All those years of believing they couldn't have children for genetic reasons. A complete fabrication based on a flawed test and a family's obsession with bloodlines. "Does Diana know?" he asked finally. "Yes. I told her when I received the results." Howard's voice broke slightly. "She hasn't spoken to me since." Vincent folded the document carefully, his mind calculating the implications of this final revelation. "Why tell me now? What purpose does this serve except to compound the damage?" Howard looked suddenly older, more fragile. "Because I'm trying to set right what I can before I die. Not for forgiveness, I don't expect that, but for truth. Something my family should have valued more than appearances." They stood in silence, the city continuing its relentless pace below them, indifferent to their personal drama. "What will you do with this information?" Howard asked eventually. Vincent considered the question. The revelation changed nothing and everything. It couldn't restore 15 years of marriage built on lies. It couldn't undo the pain or the revenge he had exacted. But it did alter the foundation upon which he had rebuilt himself. "Nothing," Vincent said finally. "Diana has suffered enough. Learning that we could have had the family she wanted but was deliberately prevented from having. It would only cause more pain." Howard nodded, seeming to have expected this answer. "You're a better man than I ever gave you credit for." "No," Vincent corrected. "I'm exactly the man your actions created." He handed back the genetic test. "Keep this. Destroy it. Diana never needs to know the full extent of your manipulation." Howard accepted the document with visible relief. "Thank you. Don't mistake this for forgiveness," Vincent said, his voice cold again. "Some architectures once destroyed can never be rebuilt." After Howard left, Vincent remained on the observation deck, watching as evening descended over the city. Lights flickered on in buildings across the skyline. Homes and offices filled with people connected by relationships, both genuine and false. His phone buzzed with a message from Mira. "Lambert meeting confirmed." "Instructions?" Vincent stared at the text, thinking of the surveillance they still maintained on various Lambert family members, the network of information he had established during his revenge that he had never dismantled. With a few words, he could resume his campaign against them, armed with this new betrayal. Instead, he typed, "Terminate all monitoring. Delete archive data. Project concluded." Myra's response came immediately. "Confirmed. Effective when?" Vincent looked out at the city once more, at the buildings he had designed and the countless others he would create in the years ahead. His legacy would not be defined by revenge, but by what he chose to build from this moment forward. Effective immediately, he replied. That night, Vincent returned to his penthouse and opened the safe where he kept the silver frame containing Nolan's cufflink. He removed it, studying the artifact of his revenge, this empty frame that had come to symbolize the hollowness of his victory. With deliberate movements, he placed the genetic test results Howard had shown him into the frame, covering the cufflink. Then he sealed the back and hung it on his bedroom wall, not as a trophy but as a reminder that the truest revenge wasn't in destroying others, but in refusing to let their actions define him. Vincent Harlow, the architect who had designed his own downfall and resurrection, finally understood the most important principle of his craft. What endured wasn't what you tore down, but what you chose to build in its place. The empty frame was empty no longer, and neither was he. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen, and I'll see you there.